The old school tabletop role playing game community online is a group of people that didn't know when to fold them. You know, when something is not taking, old school simply didn't take. You go back to the 80s, it just didn't take. AD&D first edition sold well, but, the attempt to keep players around as they were bleeding out because it didn't live up to the promises it was making to the people purchasing the game. They tried everything. Tournament play, the whole nine. But their grindy style of gaming, where you're crawling through a dungeon and not really being a hero, that did not appeal to most people that initially purchased AD&D First Edition. They purchased it because of the images of heroes out fighting dragons, and then read that the whole game was about being a hero and going out and fighting these great villains and great monsters. Instead, you were some greedy character who was a petty nobody in a dungeon going through the mud. Now, for what it really was, AD&D did it well, but that's for what it really was. It was a dungeon crawling type of game where you're not playing a hero, you're playing a normal person. That might have some exceptions. They can fight really well. Shit like this, right? But for the most part, your guys weren't somebody special. They were really just nobodies going into a dungeon. And if that's what you sold the game as, a great challenge of, these low-end people to overcome the great challenges in the dungeon to get to the great enemy at the end. And maybe they would find a dragon stuck somewhere at the bottom of a dungeon unrealistically. For what it was, that was fine. That's what it was. But that's not what AD&D First Edition was sold as. It was sold as you play the hero out on the horse, out in the field, under the sun, with having the great dragon fight. Right? Everyone knows you got to work your way up to something. But it was unrealistic, too long. You'd have to be in a campaign for a year or 2 years. And even then, 99% of the people that were willing to run AD&D First Edition wouldn't go beyond levels like level 8 to 10. They wouldn't go to the level where you're the guy out in the field fighting the dragon. They just wouldn't do that. So you'd spend most of your time never playing a hero, playing a low-end person, somewhat building up some credibility maybe later in the campaign, maybe taken a bit more serious than they were at the start, but they're just regular people with some exceptional skills going in, something like a specialist would, to work at clearing out a dungeon, getting the treasure, figuring out the traps. And most every other area of the game was just similar in gameplay. If it wasn't a dungeon, it was something similar to a dungeon. It was, the format of gameplay was the same thing. Now, for what it was, it did a fine job for what it actually was. And anyone who likes what AD&D First Edition actually was thinks it's one of the greatest games ever because it's really great at what it does. See, I agree with AD&D First Edition guys. Given what it really is, it works well for what it really is. It just didn't work whatsoever for what it was sold as. So we had a bunch of people just run away, right? Escape, go away, that's it. What this means is it was obvious to the market, it was obvious to everyone that the majority simply rejected what AD&D First Edition was. That's it. The majority simply doesn't like it. It has a cult following. For the people that do like it, they love it. They love it. They'll go to war for it. But it simply didn't sell to the majority back in the day. You see the same thing now. You see the old school. We have still millions of people active online from the old school, worldwide, from different nations. Millions of people. Yet, the majority of content creators for the old school stick to games like AD&D First Edition. So what happens? The OSR barely sells. Right? It just doesn't sell that well. Because what the majority of the clones are AD&D First Edition, and that's a game the majority rejected back then and still reject now. I am one of those people that believe if you like it and you're happy, go game. Go. Be fine. What I don't like is when people from that old school AD&D first edition world try to argue like the game was bigger than what it was, or that it can be now. Because what they end up doing is wasting our time. The evidence is already in. It doesn't sell to the majority, and it clearly still does not sell to the majority. Meaning, anybody who stays on that track thinking they're going to grow bigger, make more money, they're going to fail. And we already have the evidence that that fails. Like, I see something like the OSR being thrown away because the OSR really should have been giving second edition AD&D some love, because that wasn't given a real chance. Remember, TSR caves. It already loses its customer base for the majority before they ever even mention second edition AD&D. Before it ever comes out, they've already lost their customer base. So, in second edition, because of the way it failed with TSR with AD&D first edition, it didn't get the surplus of sales. It didn't get that special treatment coming out. And for the people that did play second edition, everyone I know, including myself, praised the game. So we felt like there was a boat missed. Like it wasn't sold that well. And they did a lot of junky things. Too many splat books. Like they spoiled what was something great. Never sold it well. And so I really believe that second edition AD&D never got a fair shake. Right? It never got a fair shake. And I figure if you're going to compete with third edition, you definitely not with the grindy AD&D first edition game. That's not going to work. We already know. That's already rejected. To reject it before the fight even starts. Right? So you can't compete with, say, the newer D&D or third edition, fourth edition, or fifth edition with that grindy. But second edition was different. It loosened up on some of that stuff. It eased up. And it did what a lot of people were demanding, right? And I thought, well, the OSR would be a great opportunity to give second edition the chance that it should have got during round one. And that it could be very popular, because I noticed a lot of new school people, when they revised the second edition books and WotC put them out, they were more interested with second edition than they were with first edition, because they match up first edition with the old school crowd that hates them. Talk to a lot of new school guys. It's our haters game. So, let alone they don't like the game as it is. They really don't like the game because of who they attach it to. They don't attach second edition to that same crowd. Actually, they see that crowd rejecting second edition, so ironically, second edition becomes a bit of a real middle ground possibility to drag new people in. So I thought the OSR would go after that, or a lot of the guys developing OSR games would think, that's the way to grow OSR, and that's a way to get some of those newer gamers over. They obviously don't want AD&D first edition, but second edition does ease up and might be more appealing to that crowd. But no, it's the old school has to keep playing a hand that they've already lost with. But they play it as if they're going to win. It's like you're sitting at a table and you're showing us your hand. You don't get a pair of the poker game. You got nothing. I mean, you might as well say you're bluffing, but you're acting like you got a hand. We all show you our hands. We're all winning, and you're losing. And yet, even with that knowledge, that player will keep sitting there and betting with that same hand as if they're going to win. You're like looking at them like, dude, you already have the evidence. You've seen our hands. We're going to win. You can't win. And the guy just keeps playing. Well, that's the old school community, the old school tabletop role-playing community. You already know you're going to fail with this. And what you're trying to do is trying to grow. That was the OSR. It's not like they're just trying this. They'll say shit like that later. But early on, when you hear talk around OSR games, it was all about growing the old school gamer base, right? To bring people back to the old school. And maybe even to have the old school sort of become potentially the gaming of the future. That this might be more of a correct direction than, say, what you're on now with WotC. That was the aim. But of course, after the OSR doesn't do anything, doesn't get anywhere, they just act like, oh, that's not our aim, we don't care. So you can't just admit that AD&D First Edition failed again. Like, you talk to an AD&D First Edition guy about the 80s. they'll say the company collapsed with second edition, yet the customer base was gone before second edition came out. And this is TSR Stabbed openly talked about this. It was a gamble going after second edition to try to keep the fucking company alive, and when that flopped, they desperately brought out splat books and everything, trying to hang on. But they just couldn't hang on. They fucked it. They pleased a minority of people, but that minority of people could not finance TSR enough to keep the company afloat. So when I say they fucked it, they needed enough money to keep the company afloat, and you can't get it by going to the minority that likes AD&D First Edition. You had to really drag back that majority that left for Palladium and Vampire games, right? And Second Edition got some of those people back, but not many, because people were bitter with D&D. That's why D&D, as far as a lot of things, was dismissed out of conversation in the 90s. Like, it was hard to talk about this stuff, because people gave up on D&D, or just went into their own little things. But when WotC came out with 3rd edition, it wasn't Magic the Gathering that showed up. Suddenly, 3rd edition was the majority of people. And you're like, where'd they come from? It's not like they developed a whole fucking thing before they bought the name D&D and brought out 3rd edition. I'm like, no, this is the 90% of players from the old school that rejected AD&D 1. And when you go talk to them, that was them. And they hated old school AD&D 1 DMs. They hated AD&D 1 because with a lot of AD&D 1 DMs, these were the guys that lived up to the reputation of the strict asshole DM. It wasn't 2nd edition where you meet the stereotype is when you get to the AD&D First Edition world. A lot less of this was in the original D&D gaming, but you find a lot of these, the worst of the worst DMs with AD&D First Edition. So you would hear 3rd edition people just fucking screaming back. This and that, this and that. And it's funny because they would go after things that were AD&D First Edition, attack it, and I'd be like, well, hold on. Like Thaco. Right? But because 2nd edition also had Thaco, so... But beyond that, the real edition wars back then, it really wasn't 2nd edition versus 3rd edition. It was 1st edition crowd versus the 3rd edition crowd. That was the edition wars for real. They were the people fighting each other, right? I mean, it made sense to me, right? But it's why did 3rd edition, within a few months of coming out, become the majority? Or just automatically have the majority of people already in the pocket? It's because they all rejected AD&D First Edition, and the old school guys couldn't accept it, right? They didn't know when to fold that hand. It's like, I get you like it, and you can like it, and you can keep playing it. But you have to be honest. It simply doesn't sell to the majority, and it's not going to tomorrow. Right? It failed. AD&D 1E absolutely failed. Alright, the majority of players thinks it sucks after playing it. So they don't like it. And it's not that they were bad DMs or anything. It's just, they played it for what it was and went, I think this fucking sucks. That was what the majority of players thought of it, because they went into that game going, I'm willing to grind a bit, but I really am here to play the hero under the sun fighting the dragon. They get through like 3 campaigns, and each campaign the DM's like, I'm not going beyond level 8, and they start realizing, so I'm never going to do that, am I? And we're never playing heroes. Play some nice guy sometimes. Well, there's the nice cleric, but not a hero. You were lied to. And people knew they were lied to. And they wanted to kick ass. That's in the image. It makes you think you're going to just get in and kick ass. You have no idea that you're going to get in and just fail the majority of the time. Like, you'll fall on your face more than you'll ever achieve a victory. Right? The dice will go against you more often than they go for you. Right? And a cruel game like old school, there's not many... The idea of rerolls just isn't there. Like, you don't get to mulligan out on most things. So it's just like, that's it, failure. You accept constant failure. Guaranteed constant failure. And you're running through the mud. That just was not a good experience for a lot of people. Now, there's a lot of what I call very boring people out there that want to be anal about every fucking thing in gaming. And I get that's why they can appreciate all that fucking camp outside the dungeon for 3 days to heal up a bit so they can go back in the dungeon. I get it. I get all the grindy, meaningless shit means something to them. I get it. I get it. But they're a minority, and to expect the majority to like that, it's just fucking delusional. You just have to think about what you like and then think about it and go, okay, I get why I like it, but it's like majority. No, if you know anything about the majority audience for any fucking thing, and you're thinking, do they want to... Common sense says no. And your ideas are absolutely no good if they don't make money and keep a business afloat. It's like, I have this idea, it will make the hobby better. No, it will destroy the hobby. Why? Because then nobody can serve the hobby, nobody can make money off this. And if you don't have the things that sell and make money, they're also not popular. It means it won't grow the hobby. It won't bring more people to the hobby. So failed ideas to keep the hobby good, it's delusional. Your ideas have to make money. They're not the best ideas if nobody wants to buy them. Right? And the thing is, they didn't want to buy them in the 80s. They don't want to buy them now. And if you run this test in 30 years, they won't want to buy it in 30 years. You'd have to eliminate tabletop role-playing games from the psyche, make it that people have not even heard of them, and then bring it back again. And maybe for a couple of years, before people realize, they can get into it and then go, yeah, it's not my cup of tea. You'll just fail at the end, but maybe you'll sell a bunch of games early on. But that's it. Beyond that, this is a failed thing. AD&D 1 and original D&D are failed ideas. And I would have loved to have seen OSR give 2nd edition the honest chance that it should have got, because, I can actually say, I don't know 2nd edition would fail. And even the market admits that. Even WotC admitted that when they revised it. They get it. They're the Hasbro's market people. They looked at it and go, just didn't have enough time. You don't know if this thing would have done any better if it had the same push, right? If it had really had the proper financing behind it, where it would have went. Didn't go anywhere, right? And it's like, so, you basically, in my opinion, 2nd edition never got the opportunity it should have. And I think that's why WotC went out of its way to reprint the books, because there is some quality there. It's not that it's an inspiration for 3rd edition. It's a sign that this is something the players want. 3rd edition it's a sign of what players wanted, but it's a thing that goes too far. In my opinion, 2nd edition doesn't do the go too far thing. But for AD&D 1E, the cult guys that are in that small little group, they're so religious about what they're doing that any minor ease up on that is no good. The problem is, over 90% of the player base wanted an ease up. So the little cult following won. And they put TSR out of business. All right, the old school people you hear talk about AD&D 1st edition, that is why WotC owns the label D&D. Because of them. That's why TSR went out of business. Because of them. Because that crowd didn't know when to fold it. And the worst thing is, some of the staff that worked for TSR agreed with them. Like, it's not they wanted the company to flop, but they thought that the cult following, the minority, represented a bigger amount of people. It just didn't. So, 90% of your player base simply rejects this AD&D 1st edition gameplay. So it was delusional. So even the staff and even the cult following really believed in this delusion, and they never let it go. And you know how you know? You look at the OSR and you're like, man, what potential was there? And it's completely gone. It had hype so many years ago with Stranger Things and celebrities coming around. Had a bunch of hype for a minute, and that's when it really needed to go somewhere. And even Shadowdark didn't save it, because most people now, I've noticed, they don't line Shadowdark up with the OSR. I notice a lot of people talk about it like it's a separate game. I mean, the majority of people I talk to. Because most people see the OSR as just clones of AD&D 1 and original D&D. And That means it won't grow. There's a minimal purchasing power, and it will stay that way. Because I get for the cult following, they're happy with the OSR because it serves them. But it does nothing for the OSR. Those guys won't make more money. And they're going to realize that. They're going to realize, shit, we're really serving a minority that isn't growing at all. Yeah. You're serving a minority. Now, the OSR exists for that minority because, yeah, you can keep an individual person going who doesn't need to pay other people or have a business, right? But my point would be is, if we turn the OSR into a company and turned it into a business to produce games, the purchasing power you see now in the OSR could not keep that company afloat. So the OSR company would be out of business in less than a year. And if it hung on, it'd be in the red. So even if it went beyond a year, it basically should have shut down before that. So it wouldn't be lingering on in victory, it'd be lingering on in losses, right? So it's like the OSR as a company could not finance itself based on the purchasing power that you see in the OSR right now. And it wouldn't matter if they kept selling those games for 10 years. The purchasing power won't grow. Because you're not going to come to the hobby and expect to grow a game that is initially unpopular. Like, it just is not going to work. Right? You can get the people that already love it to purchase your shit, but you just got to understand, you're not selling it to anyone outside of them. And I think this old school approach has been so bitter that WotC, the staff, and the company have never been influenced by the opinions from the old school. What a shame. Right? The old school has been so terrible that the positive effects that it could have had on the hobby over 50 years, it's had pretty much none. The only positive effect old school D&D had on the hobby is existing. That was a benefit to get where we're at. Beyond existing, second edition was its high point, its best point, and the best thing they put out there they ignored. And then they made terrible decisions, the old school did, for the next 50 fucking years. Alright? That's it. They weren't business people. They had no idea what they were doing. And it shows now. It shows now. It's obvious now. They still, in 2025, have no fucking clue what they're doing. They don't know when to give it up. So even if you do all the right things with them, with a customer base like that, here's what's sad. With a customer base that is in the old school, even if you go to them and serve them the right way, they won't reward you even when it would be beneficial to them. So you could do the work that in any other hobby or any other situation would get you praise, get you money, get you ahead, get you support. You go to that crowd because they are so religious to the failed ideas, they will refuse to go and support things that are good. Period. The most they'll do is something new. Oh, it's just a clone of AD&D First Edition. It's new. It's a clone. So I'll purchase that. Will that help the hobby? No. Does the old school help the hobby at all? No. I just got to ask people that are in other games other than D&D and the new school. Would the hobby even notice if every old school member of the tabletop role-playing game hobby disappeared tonight and didn't exist and a year went by? Would anybody notice, and would anybody care? And would it change the hobby either way? Here's what I'm convinced. If every old school person disappeared tonight, vanished, in a year, the hobby would be no different. Like, it wouldn't be better off. It wouldn't be worse off. It'd be like they have so little effect on the hobby that they might as well not exist, is what I'm trying to say. Alright? They might as well not exist. Because if we eliminated the old school out of the hobby right now, the hobby would remain the same. It'd probably get better, to be honest. There'd be less conflict on many issues. There'd be less bitterness. And maybe some of the new school crowd be willing to take another look at second edition where they don't have to hear a bunch of old fucking people being negative, hateful, and like living in a very dark place mentally when you come across them. You won't have to deal with them. You could just check out some old stuff without that crowd getting in your way, making you sour about the whole thing. So, in reality, if we took away the old school right now, overall for everyone in the hobby going forward, beyond them, it would be a good thing. Yeah. See, the old school are some of the most selfish people in the hobby. I got to be real with you, to the people I've met. They really believe the hobby is just there to serve them, but they are to do nothing to make sure that that service is good. No lifting a finger, no making an effort. Hey, if you buy this game, that will help the hobby. And it's an interesting game. It's new. It might be really good. Help the hobby overall, produce better stuff for you going forward. What are you going to do, old school guy? Oh no, I'll buy a clone that will have no effect on the hobby and do nothing for anybody but myself. Oh. So, if all of you are only serving yourselves, can you see why the hobby doesn't care if you exist? Because you're not doing nothing good for the hobby, you're doing something good for you. And it's obvious because what you're doing isn't helping the hobby. It is only helping you. It's not like there's some byproduct where the hobby is better off because of what you're doing. No, you're actually harming the hobby because you have potential purchasing power. You have potential influence on the hobby that you chuck away. You toss away to nothingness. Yeah. This is why I one of the main reasons I've separated myself from that old school, because I find it to be a very dark, depressing place. Like, go listen to their content creators. All they fucking do is bitch and get angry, and they're negative, and they're living in darkness, and everything is negative. Everything is fucking negative. And the only time they have a good time is when they're when their negativity is glorified, they're happy. So the more they're attacking people or whatnot, then they're happy. I'm like, are you guys ever just genuinely like laid back and happy? No. Oh, Christ. Okay. All right, there you go.